So as I just said, my name is Sophie Carrillo-Mandel. I'm a facilitator with the Consensus Building Institute. I facilitate the SOFAR collaboratives for those of you that I don't know. I'm joined by my colleague, Decca Mohammed, who is mostly taking notes today. If you have any technical issues, you can send a private chat to Decca and she can help you figure it out. And we had a request from a member who couldn't attend today to record the meeting, so we'll be doing that. All right, so we'll have our first presentation from Susan Durham at El Dorado National Forest. She is the environmental coordinator who's going to be talking about both the Caldor fire and mosquito fire recovery efforts. They both just had public comment periods in September wrap up. Then Mark Egbert speaking about the Resource Conservation District's work on the Greater Placerville Wildfire Resilience Strategy. And then we have Tom Meyer again from the Office of Wildfire Preparedness and Resilience coming to speak about the public engagement component of the Community Wildfire Protection Plan. He spoke about the plan overall before we left on our summer hiatus back in June, and now we'll hear specifically about public engagement opportunities. And then I have an update from Michelle Wolfgang, who is from El Dorado National Forest. She's the partnership coordinator there. She's on vacation, but she's been working on some alignment around SOFAR partner goals and planning, and I'll give a little update on that. And then we'll have the usual member updates and announcements and talk about any next steps. And then, of course, we will talk about the next meetings of the working groups. So before we jump in, are there any questions about the agenda or anything else people feel like we need to talk about today? All right, then I will share the ground rules before going over the first presentation. And also, if you want to share your name and what agency or entity that you're with, if you're with any, or if you're just a community member in the chat, that'll help us get to know each other. There's a little bit too many people to go around the room. So just a reminder, we are a collaborative. In this setting, all points of view and ideas have value. We value dialogue over debate through active listening. Take space and make space. So if you're someone who is really energized and wants to ask a lot of questions, just give a little space for the quieter people to ask their questions before you ask a series. And if you are someone who is really curious but feels a little bit shy, we really encourage you to step forward and pose your questions. You can put them in the chat if it's easier than coming off mute and asking them. And just, we're all online, so sometimes we have technical issues, have patience and creativity working with each other virtually. And if anyone has other ground rules that they'd like to add, feel free to add them in the chat. All right, well, with that then, let's hand it over to Susan.
Hey, good afternoon, and thank you for inviting me. So I'll try to be clear, but I can't monitor chats, and I don't mind if you interrupt to ask questions. So maybe, Sophie, you could facilitate that, because I know I'm limited in time to get to my meeting at 2. So I'll just try to give a brief update on the fire projects. So mosquito fire, it was scoped in August, closing in September. It was extended a week because of the Crozier fire to give people more time. And I'll have to confirm that they're on schedule. They were trying to initiate their 30-day comment period this month. I'm not certain, if we're tracking for that and looking for a decision in the spring. And we actually have contractors helping us with it, and they do a great job. Panorama Environmental, they're contracted through the Great Basin by the Great Basin Institute for us, and they're the ones who helped us with our roadside hazard tree abatement project that was signed last year. So we have a great relationship, and they received, I think, about 8 comments for the initial scoping. They're working on processing those now. And I'm not certain how familiar people are with mosquito fire, because I think I'm not sure that that's inside the area you mostly watch. So it's a little bit larger, well, probably a lot larger than the fire burn scar, because they're working on fuel breaks and doing prescribed fire. So it's more using watershed boundaries than just the burn scar. And what else? So let's see, and it's just on the El Dorado site. So the Tahoe National Forest has their own work they're doing on that fire. And let's see, I think it burned about almost 8,000 acres on our side. So the purpose of it is they're trying to maximize the economic recovery from the dead and dying. And they're trying to enhance the resilience to future disturbance and have fuel break treatment areas. So setting up a fuel break network, and that's kind of what's driving the larger boundary to put fuel breaks in sensible locations. And they're yeah. So they're trying to think in terms of long-term forest productivity. And let's see, what else? And it is looking to because I have the two fire projects in my head, I always have to look because I confuse them all the time. So they're trying to reduce wildfire risks in the WUI and to modify fire behavior. And they will be doing prescribed fire, so to enhance the ecological condition and bolster resilience. So so that's pretty much, I don't know how much detail you want. So part of it does include some salvage harvest and reforestation on a little more than, well, just under 3,000 acres in the burn area, and some road work and repair. And there will be temp roads with it. And there'll be mastication only treatments on just a small acreage. But a big thing is developing and maintaining fuel breaks and doing the prescribed burning. And then let me go to the Caldor fire, our other one I confuse it with. So that's a further along in the process, and it's a much larger project area and much more complex of a project. So it's scoped in 2023, just the initial scoping, and it was developed just a little bit, and it needed a lot more development at that time. So I'm just going to be honest. I know you know all this. And then we went out for the 30-day comment period at the end of August, and it closed in the end of September. And we received 29 comments. So a lot more than mosquito and more complex. And I'm going through trying to set a structure up so that our specialists can do the comment consideration and not duplicate, trying to combine similar comments and make it a little more structured. So I'm kind of the pinch point in this right now. And when I get off this call, I'm going to a Caldor Fire IDT meeting. So I know you've been introduced to Caldor Fire. So it's being done under a maximum extent scenario for the majority of the project, but there's a phase one that we're doing at the same time. And there's more specificity with phase one, and it's also being done under the emergency action determination that was authorized for us. And what that means is that we won't go through an objection period. So we put the 30-day, we put the draft EA out for the 30-day comment period, and that's closed. So we just need to make the necessary revisions based on comments. And then we would put phase one, a final out with a signed decision. And the remainder of the project under the maximum extent scenario we'll go through the normal process. So we revise the EA as necessary for the final EA, update the specialist reports as needed, and then go out for a 45-day objection period. And those, well, wait, yeah, I have to keep my head straight on this. And for that, okay, so we go, yeah, we put that out for a 45-day objection period. And anyone who commented on during the initial scoping period or the 30-day comment period has standing to object, as long as they're objecting on a point that they raised in their comments. And if we have objections, then we enter an objection review period, and that's when the regional office would assemble an objection review team from different forests to go through the objections and respond to those. So, but that would be later. So if we can finalize the EA, which I think we can for the emergency action determination, I would maybe in November. We hoped it could be sooner, but like I say, I'm the pinch point right now. I'm getting through the comments. But then for the maximum extent, we'd have to go through the objection period and then the objection review. So potentially we could be looking at a decision this spring under that. And let's see, we did receive 29 comments during our 30-day comment period on the draft EA. So there were various kinds of comments. Some people called out the need for home hardening and defensible space in WUIs and to focus there rather on the larger extent further out. So that's some people. And then this is a standard comment that EAs get, that the magnitude of the project warrants an environmental impact report. And so, so for people to understand what really drives needing an environmental impact it's really statement in the federal system, but what really drives it is having significant effects or controversy, but not controversy in the sense of disagreement, but controversy in the sense of being unknowns. Say you're doing a new treatment or, yeah. So those are the main things that would drive needing to be at that higher level of analysis. And then some people were concerned about the use of the emergency authority for the phase 1. And it's in thinking that we're bypassing public engagement that way. And some people are concerned that if the forest is starting to recover naturally and we go in, we're setting it back or we'll end up with even-aged management. But in my mind, it's close to 3 years after the fire, and I don't see activities now setting us back to even age, because to have uneven age, it needs to be over a much longer period. Not a 3-year difference is basically the same time in my mind when you're talking a forest. But there, I understand the concern about having those features that you would have in a naturally regenerated forest. And some concerns about salvage harvest, protecting the existing seedlings and new vegetation, concerns about being ahead of the California spotted owl listing, some concern about old growth forest, let's see, and some concerns about fire breaks, where some people see fire breaks being more like a channel that carries fire. And then, let's see, some people express concerns about losing access to roads and concerns about climate change. And for the roads, there's a little bit under watershed restoration where we talked about the potential to decommission roads, but those primarily would be maintenance level 1 roads, which are not open to the public anyway. So only open for administrative purposes when needed, and then we're supposed to close them appropriately. And there's just a small mileage of maintenance level 2 roads that, and that would depend on the needs, but we could drop that. But those are the main comments that I saw, and concerns about biomass. And I was seeing like the WUI areas, people living or recreating in WUIs actually tend to be in favor of more treatments and wanting to have lower stocking rates around their properties. Yeah, so there are certain themes that are in here. So
Susan, I know you have to leave it at
oh,
2, before
yeah,
2. Can
I'll
we,
take questions. Yeah.
okay, wonderful. And so just to reiterate, I heard that you said, is the objection period, the 45-day objection period, do you think that might start in November with the decision coming the spring?
Honestly, I'm not certain about. I think that we can have the decision on phase 1 in November, but for the maximum extent, which would go through the objection, I don't know if we'll need to separate them from phase 1, if we would need to put more work into the EA, because it's more involved than what's under phase 1. There's unknowns. And honestly, I haven't been on a project like this, so I don't want to pretend that I really know for certain.
Okay.
But potentially we could enter the objection period if we can address all the concerns for the maximum extent in the draft EA at that time.
Okay, it's helpful for folks to know the timeline. All right, let's open it up for questions. Yeah, at the bottom of your screen, there should be a little hand, or there might be a reaction. Not for you, Susan. This is for,
Okay.
don't worry about it. To get in the chat, to get in the queue, you can raise your hand, or you can just put your question in the chat. Dave, go ahead.
I'll open chat then.
And Dave, you're muted if you're trying to speak.
Sorry, Sophie. It was reconfigured for me in a way that I'm not used to.
Yeah.
All right. Susan, when you're speaking initially about the mosquito, you talked about productivity of the forest. And when you talk about productivity, it sounds more like agricultural. It sounds more like, trying to have more timber harvested in the approach, and that gets us concerned about even age and even species. To what extent, but also in particular the Caldor, are you thinking about reforestation as opposed to productivity?
Yeah, I think it's not all, and I had less involvement with mosquito in the past few months. So I think they're getting more at moving. Well, let's see. I'm trying to find my notes on this. So trying to get back to restore the ecological pathways and to move towards desired conditions. And they are thinking in terms of sustainable forests and forest resilience and maintaining health. But I understand, yeah, if using the term productivity does sound more like a timber term, but that's not the only purpose for this. And it is really trying to get to resilient forests that not going to maybe not exactly the compositions and structure from before, because obviously that's part of being, from our management, but getting to resilience in the changing conditions as best we can. and allowing natural succession to start to occur again. And I think there is that thought of trying to get back to forested lands and not have the shrubs take over, especially in mosquito area, because where Scotch broom and other shrubs can take over. So,
Thank you, Susan. I'm hoping in the upper reaches of the Caldor, we can do something so that some century from now we could have a red fir forest again. There's some
Yeah.
beautiful red fir forests that got
Yeah.
destroyed.
yeah, I've been to those in the past.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Dave. Do we have more questions for Susan about either fire recovery effort? Craig?
Thanks for the update, Susan. So our letter is available if anybody is interested in reading it. Susan has got it, that's for sure. Very interested. So what we, Fire Restoration Group in particular, you know, and I was one of the initiators of the SOFAR collaborative a long time ago, and it matters to me. But the way we've traditionally done business is when we decide to bake the cake, we decide on the ingredients and we all work together and put the ingredients in the bowl and we mix it around and we put it in the oven and we bake it and then we take it out and since we all participated in the baking and the cooking up, then we were more likely to enjoy eating it. And I don't feel like that's what we're doing here. And that has me pretty distressed. So I did call up Susan when I sent the letter in saying my unhappiness was not meant at her. And it was professional unhappiness. But working with PSW and all the zone ecologists, researchers, very interested in the principles of GTR 270, the post-fire restoration framework, and 278, the zone-specific document, and early fire reintroduction. So I won't, if you're interested in reading it, I can either send it or you can get a copy. It's in the docket, right? So it's available for everybody, right, Susan?
Actually, that hasn't gone in Pinion Public yet, so I'd have to upload them, but it will be available. It's just not there yet.
Yeah. So want to see more of an ecological approach, want to see more of the ecologist's point of view in the document and in the strategies, particularly in the reforestation, particularly in the 50 to 75% high severity. Decide what to do there together rather than reforest the whole thing. The GTR 270 has a whole appendices about not doing that. And so there's some tension around, are we going to accept and utilize, at least on some of the acres, that best available scientific information? That's all I'll say. Thanks.
And it's such a large project area, and especially with our current budget not being very good, there will be a limit to what we can implement. And I think right now there's a little more focus on the WUI areas, but it's definitely good to engage. And I can't tell, is Becky on this call this time?
No.
I don't see Becky now.
Okay.
I think she's up at Caples where David and I were going to be today.
Oh, okay. Yeah, we definitely need her input too.
Yeah.
Dave, we're about ready to move on, but go ahead and ask your question.
Thank you, Sophie. Sorry, Mark. I was hoping you could say something about Independent Badger. I think it's a green forest, but as part of that, you got the Caldor emergency with it. And so is that because there's transmission lines on that side? And just why the Independent Badger in the same pot?
Oh, yeah. I have to think about that and look at what, and in Independent Badger is that green tree park is under the emergency authority, but I think it's partly to do the thinning in the WUI in case of future fires, since they're coming so frequently now. And since the community definitely wants the thinning.
I think you're right, Susan. I think
Mhm.
it's up in the Camino area and there's
Yes, it is.
transmission lines, I think, too. But I just want to hear
Right.
your thoughts about it. All right, sorry, Mark, I didn't mean to ace you.
Oh, no worries. I had my hand up for just a second, but since you prompted me, that independent badger, that's right next to the Camino Pollock Pines work that we're doing under Fire Adapted 50. It is not the same project, but it is adjacent to it, and it does build on that, I believe. But going back to the productivity, I think that if we look at that, my definition is really looking at watershed or forest health in terms of hydrologic productivity, recreational productivity, ecological productivity, and also economic productivity. And when you have a healthy forest, you have all of those things that thrive as well. And I think that's a balance of trying to achieve the ultimate goal, so that there is ultimate productivity from these landscapes. And I think we all depend on those levels of different productivity for our own personal reasons, but I think that it also represents a status of desire, condition, and resilience, so we don't lose that productivity.
Thanks, Mark.
Yeah, thank you, Mark. And I'm sorry, but I do have to get off for a Caldor meeting now for comment consideration.
Thank you,
So
Susan.
thank you for
being here.
having me.
Are you all right with if we share your email address with the collaborative?
That's fine.
Okay.
They probably have it anyways. Okay, well, thank you.
Thank you. Have a good day. All right, wonderful. So next we have Mark Egbert. Mark with El Dorado County Resource Conservation District, and they're the lead agency on the Greater Placerville Wildfire Resilience Strategy, which is a large-scale effort to mitigate the risk of fire in Placerville and surrounding communities. And I believe they're seeking public input and talking to us about that effort today. So I'll hand it over to Mark.
Very cool. If you can enable the screen sharing.
Absolutely.
I would like to say that we will show a slide of our partners on this, but we do have Nick Miley, who's here, who's going to be helping with the presentation. And we also have Juliana Prosperi, who is been working on this project as well. And I'm sure she will speak up if she feels the need to, but we're giving her a little bit of a break today. But she's usually really leading these presentations. So, but that being said, let me share my screen. Okay, so can you see what I'm seeing here? It's a little bit, I'm running it from the, there we go.
We see the back end. It's not the it's the presenter view. There we go. Here it comes.
Okay, so this is the City of Placerville Community Wildfire Resilience Strategy. I think it's really an amazing opportunity for the RCD and everyone in the community and surrounding community. We've been working diligently on so many different projects throughout the past, and I think the timing of this is really, really important for where we are going, where a lot of other entities are going, and it just fits really well within, I think, what's needed. So this is the overview of the agenda. There's a lot to go over, so I'll be fast, but stop me if I'm going too fast. There's going to be a technical element to this that Nick will be going through that I really want to make sure that I leave enough time for. So, but please let me know if I'm going too fast. Right now, our organization is, we have WSP, which we're really happy to have. They just completed the general plan safety element update, and they're working with other partners on other plans that we'll go over. We've got Spatial Informatics Group, and that's who Nick is with. SIG was really influential with our Fire Adapted 50 project to help our modeling to evaluate whether or not or evaluate what impact our project was going to have in terms of carbon sequestration, avoided emissions, and fire behavior. So we're really happy to have them on. And Wildfire Services is also a member of the team. When we get down to actually designing projects and putting prescriptions together, I think they're going to be really, really helpful to ensure we have the best types of prescriptions that being planned that we can for the environment there. So what is the wildfire resilient strategy? It's a comprehensive community-specific plan designed to identify and guide wildfire preparedness, risk analysis, and development of mitigation projects. And that is really the key, is the development of mitigation projects. We've been doing that for a really long time, and we know that not all projects are the same, and not every environment is the same. So I think that we're really going to be having a really intelligent, smart approach to designing large landscape scale projects, but also individual community-based projects. You know, we're going to be scaling these out to be as large and landscape as possible, but we also know that they has to have a alignment with our funding strategies, our capacity, and community readiness. So, but it's also going to facilitate and promote interagency communication and collaboration. I think that that's a really, really important part of this, is that not one entity or agency or can do any of this by themselves. We've learned specifically over the last few years, especially, that there's a variety of different ways to get the job done. And so we're going to be exploring different types of agreements, different types of ways that we can not only participate in the planning or coordinate in the planning, but coordinate in the implementation, and then also coordinate in the long-term maintenance of these projects, which is a huge part of what we're trying to do to ensure that we have a long-term sort of benefit of what this is being done here. It provides modeling for wildfire risk mitigation. It's a guiding document. We're really hoping that this does provide a benefit to other planning efforts around the county and the region. We're already talking to other people about the framework that we're using for their community wildfire protection plans and other areas, as well as developing landscape community wildfire protection projects. And again, we really have to integrate with existing plans that have been done in the past and what is being done now. The RCD is fortunate, and I will say that we have a really, really, really great partner who actually, I will say, I will totally give credit to. They initiated this, the Sierra Nevada Conservancy. I remember getting a call, and I can't say enough about Sierra Nevada Conservancy and Elisa and Chris and everybody else, and now Matt, who know what's going on, and they're connected to us on the ground. And they called and they said, what can we do? This is during Caldor. And they said, what can we do? Where's a community that you know, want to establish a mitigation strategy for? And it was obvious that Placerville was right there. It's our community seat. And so they issued a grant. It's actually over $300,000 for us to develop the strategy. And I just think that they had the foresight, and they provided the support for us to do this. With that being said, I think they also have a lot of expectations of what this is going to do and what it's going to be. I think that the RCD is also key partner in this, because we have worked across the landscape in many different levels on many different jurisdictions and in many different ways. So we don't want to, you know, the post-fire recovery stuff is great. We're really working hard on that. This is designed to not ever have to work in post-fire recovery in the planning area ever again, we hope. Or if there is a fire, at least it's something that's not going to be so devastating that it's going to reduce what I'll call the productivity of this area. Because again, there are so many assets across the watershed, but within this planning area, with the historic, with all of the different types of infrastructure and critical assets that are there, I think that it does present a challenge, but I think even a bigger opportunity. This is the project study area. It's 80,000 acres that consists of the city of Placerville and surrounding areas. So we're basically going from the South Fork American River to the north, all the way past Diamond Springs to the south. If you know where Patterson Lake is, Martinez Creek, we definitely wanted to capture Weber Creek drainage all the way up to Fresh Pond on the east, where we encapsulate all of the fire adapted 50, Highway 50 corridor elements, and then going all the way past Single Springs on the west. The boundary was established to be it is the same as the El Dorado County Transportation Commission's project area, and it was defined based on transportation corridors, evacuation, connectivity, and also where fire history and other elements kind of provided a really good boundary for us to develop a strategy that would hopefully benefit that city center of what is Placerville right in the center of the screen. So there is a lot going on. There's been a lot of initiatives. I will start off with the formation of the County Office of Wildfire Preparedness and Resiliency, and you have Tom here, which is great. Has come on and he's actually just been so amazing to do what he's done, and it's a big load to carry, and he really is a great coordinator, communicator, and organizer. So we really appreciate that. But it is everything that we are doing needs to fit within the wildfire strategy for the County of El Dorado. It needs to integrate with the currently developed, which you'll get into, Community Wildfire Protection Plan for the West Slope. We also need to integrate with the El Dorado County Multi-Jurisdictional Hazard Mitigation Plan that Juliana and her team at WSP has been working on. Kyle is here with the El Dorado County Water Agency. We are working with them closely for the Upper American River Programmatic Watershed Plan. CAL FIRE with their Amador El Dorado Unit Plan. We also know that everything that Susan just talked about with Forest Service abilities to work in the WUI and help us with those landscape treatments on Forest Service land is going to be really, really critical. And again, working and utilizing all of the data from all of these plans, including the wildfire evacuation preparedness study, is giving us the ability to not replicate all of the efforts that's been going on, all the wildfire hazard risk assessments, all the GIS data. We are utilizing the county GIS data hub that Stantec through the water agency is helping the El Dorado County GIS department develop. So I think that we're going to be able to not only access this data for the benefit of it, of this strategy, but then also move forward and share the outcomes or why these projects have been done, what initiatives have been done, how they're different, assess a gap, do a gap analysis, and identify how our project really complements the efforts or the initiatives or purposes of all of these plans. And it really comes down to community wildfire protection and resilience, not only for homes, but for our environment as well. So currently, like I said, we have the CWPP. CAL FIRE is working with land tenure for developing of project and project designs and trying to identify where projects would be most beneficial across the landscape based on various inputs and design. OWAPR, they're leading really a home hardening defensible space program. They've got a massive project in the Placerville planning area that maybe Tom will cover. We are, the fire risk reduction community list was adopted. Placerville, it needs to, they were, correct me if I'm wrong, Juliana, and David, but Placerville is not on that list, but the rest of the county was. So that's something that's a gap that we need to address. That's going to be important for us for future funding.
You're correct, Mark.
Yeah, and we talked about that at the last Fire Safe Council meeting. And I did mention the GIS portal as well. The scope is to, again, build upon the existing plans, consider the impact of wildfires on the community lifestyles, the dynamic conditions of the watershed. We all know that it's different when Apple Hill is in season. We all know it's different when kids are in school. What's the sort of dynamic situations of what we do when we do it, and when that fire is most likely going to occur, and the potential of that fire. And again, developing community-based maps that people can understand. A lot of times when the plans are done, they sit on the shelf, but we want to use this plan as really the starting point for our project. We need to make sure we have information and exchange and distribution of that information in ways that people can understand and continue to provide input. So that's going to be really, really, really important. Again, the general plan safety element and a whole bunch of other things. This is our sort of 6-step process. We do have a technical advisory committee, and I have a slide on that. We do have a communication strategy, and we're going to get into that too, but I think it's really important. We're going to have an exercise here and for you guys to kind of take a look at if you haven't already. I think that, I kind of break this down into agency communications. We have organizations and nonprofits, business associations, and other community groups, and then we also have individuals. Individuals who live in the project area and so forth. So we have been out really trying to be as aggressive as possible. I know this week in one day, we had 7 meetings with organizations and individuals. We've got like 30 more meetings coming up before October 15th of meeting with people and getting information from them as far as, what's your priorities? What do you have a strategic plan? What is your budget? Do you have projects? Do you have needs? What can we do to help you and identify where your priorities are? Are there opportunities for cooperation? Things of that nature. We will develop an updated hazard and wildfire risk assessment. We will identify potential future mitigation strategies. That is the heart of what we are going to do, because we're going to identify these mitigation strategies and we're going to undergo a programmatic environmental compliance process where we look at these within the project area. What are the proposed actions? What is the design of those? How do they vary? How are we implementing standard operating procedures, BMPs, to avoid any type of impact? And can we do a consolidated sort of programmatic CEQA document, not really using the CalVTP, because I don't know if that's the best example for us to use, but something very, very similar. And then modeling what is our outcomes of our project in terms of a lot of different indicators that we may be modeling, not only fire behavior and carbon, but other things I think Nick is going to go over as well. And then the strategy. The strategy is the ultimate deliverable. It's going to be a strategy that has a financial strategy. How are we going to fund it? Not just basing everything on grants, but this is a regional forest and fire capacity sort of element, initiative, and we want to make sure that it meets the goals of that. We want to make sure it meets the watershed improvement program initiatives for the Sierra Nevada Conservancy. We're also working to make sure it meets the ability and priorities of the Forest Service and any other funding source such as CAL FIRE or any other entity. But we also want to make sure that the strategy involves education, increasing awareness, building advocacy, and building partnerships to implement these mitigation strategies over time. This is a long-term project. So this is the Technical Advisory Committee. We've had one meeting. We are preparing for another one. We're getting really, really good input from all of these participants. And if you have any questions or would like to be on the Technical Advisory Committee, please just let us know and we'll make sure that there's a spot for you. But I will tell you that there are roles for each member of the Technical Advisory Committee. I believe the Technical Advisory Committee over time is going to change, where we evolve into different committees to help us with community outreach, education, funding strategies, and so forth. So yeah. So again, this is a re-emphasizing our communication strategy. And what this comes down to is making sure that we communicate back to those entities who are developing those other projects to make sure that we have alignment and that we have consistency and support, but also that we're not duplicating efforts and that we're more supportive. It really comes down to community engagement. We know that when you propose a project in someone's neighborhood, you want them to be an advocate. And so increased awareness of what we're trying to do is going to be really important. We will not implement anything if we think that if we don't have access to private property, getting right of entry agreements and so forth. If you look at land ownership within the project area, it's primarily private lands. So those private landowners are going to have to be really informed and aware of what's going on so that we have the logistics and feasibility sort of understood before we sort of try to bring in public funds to implement a project. The approach to wildfire risk assessment, and Nick, I'm not sure I don't have page numbers on the slide, so I know you were going to be on slide number 14.
Yeah,
I'm not sure.
This is where I was going to jump in.
Okay, that's what I thought. So excellent. All right, well, thank you. And I'll take questions at the end after Nick gets through.
Yeah, thanks, Mark.
Yeah.
So just to reintroduce myself, my name is Nick Miley. I work for a company called Spatial Informatics Group. Everyone calls us SIG. Just real quick, SIG's a really cool company that basically is an environmental think tank that has, GIS mapping at its core. And what kind of sets us apart is that we're vertically integrated so that we can produce software that facilitates the work that we do at a field level. But then we have this feedback that allows us to not just make recommendations, but actually to fill the gaps in those recommendations. So you'll see one of those solutions is a free open source wildfire mitigation planning software that we developed called Planscape that we'll be using for this project. And so that's one of the great things, at least for me, to be working for SIG is that you really get to not just point out problems, but solve them. So part of that is, we want to build this fire risk assessment. We want it to be at a landscape scale. We want to protect our critical facilities and infrastructure, and we want to have this be an iterative process so that we can continue to refine our treatment planning so that we really do touch on as many different priorities that we can to get essentially the most bang for our buck. And our goal here is to go from, work on a laptop to get chainsaws roaring out there on the landscape and really address this problem. And so it's a difficult problem to solve. I think we all know that once we start looking beyond small scale treatments to large landscape scale treatments, that we run into a lot of roadblocks. And so we have some tools and techniques that we've brought to bear in this project to address that and try and build off existing work that's been done before. Mark talked about that with all the different the reports and studies that have been done in the area, integrating that into our work, building on it with the goal to quickly get to doing treatments. So we can move to the next slide, Mark. So this is our project study area. As Mark said, it's about 80,000 acres. This is color coded to show the land ownership types. The green is Forest Service there up in the northeast area. The light tan color is non-industrial private land. You have the pink, which I believe, without my key here, I think that's locally owned. So, and then the goldish color is private industrial land. And so you can see that the project area is primarily privately owned land. So we have a lot of work to do to integrate with the different landowners, their priorities, what they can afford to do, what they want to do, and create treatment scenarios that's beneficial to the community at large, and while addressing the needs of private property owners. And as we've said, that's not necessarily an easy task, but we have some tools and techniques that kind of break up that project into manageable sections that we can attack piece by piece. So next slide. So when we're doing our landscape analysis, we want to start with the built environment. In the upper left-hand corner, we have all of our roads, as we'll get into treatments. Along roadways are often the least expensive and most effective for addressing the other issues that we'll get into that we want our treatments to address. We also want to protect our schools. It's hard to have a community without a place for our children to go to get educated. So we want to know where those are from, all the way from the preschool up to the college level. So we have all those marked out. Our critical infrastructure, this is defined by FEMA. These are your healthcare facilities, your police and fire departments, your cell phone towers, and some of your utilities. We also have a separate layer for the utilities specifically. We want to make sure that, in the event of a fire, that we have the means to protect transmission lines and in substations, for example. So we can go to the next slide. The other component here is the natural environment, or in this case, the vegetation type and the geography. So on the left-hand side here, we have a simple map of the vegetation type in the project area. And the two primary types of vegetation we have is the light green is our mixed conifer, and then that lightish brown color is shrub and oak woodland area. And this poses an interesting problem in the sense that you can't have a uniform treatment scenario for the entire project area. What works in the oak savanna is not what works in the mixed conifer higher elevations, and there's bleed over, you can see. So you have to be smart with the proposed treatments that you're going to put the proposed treatments that you're creating. Another issue is slope. And so we create these slope break maps that make it easy to target areas that are of less steepness. So as you go from the green to the red, you're increasing in slope. And I think anybody who's familiar with the area will recognize the north end of the project areas where you drop into that South Fork of the American River Canyon, and you get very steep slopes that are difficult, if not impossible, to do meaningful treatments on. However, and lucky for us, much of the project area is in this green zone that is very manageable for treatment implementation. So once we kind of have a hold on or a grasp on the vegetation, the topography, and then the built environment, we want to look at where our fire risks are. And we have a number of ways of doing that. This is certainly not an exhaustive list that I have here, but I think it is telling. You have up in the upper left-hand slide, or excuse me, image, we have the annual burn probability. And what you need to know here is the burn probability goes down as you move into the lighter yellows and goes up as you move towards the orange. And this is what you would expect. There's a lower burn probability, annual burn probability with mixed con versus oak savanna. However, that doesn't mean that the fire outcomes are better. So if you move to the mean average conditional flame length, which is on the upper right-hand side, green would be lower flame lengths, and as you move into the yellow and oranges, you have greater flame lengths. So this is where you kind of get the idea of the potential for crown fires and torching of the forest. And so you see there's kind of a juxtaposition between those two figures, that your mixed con area actually has greater risk of having high severity fire that would affect structures in the built environment. Now, one of the things that's interesting about the project area is if you look at this bottom left-hand graph, this is fire scars in the area going back to 1950. And as they get darker, those are more recent. As they get lighter, they're further back in time. And this project area really hasn't seen high severity, large scale fire. So it's kind of this unique pocket on the west slope of the Sierra that has a great opportunity to implement some of these treatment measures to get a hold of this fire risks that we're all dealing with in California and on the western United States at large, and really, take matters into our own hands. So I think that is just a really interesting thing about this. So it kind of tells me that it's not if a fire is going to happen, it's when, and we want to get through this planning and get to treatments before we have an incident like that. Finally, we have
Okay.
the bottom. Yep.
Can I just check in on how do you have more slides after this, or are we gonna have time for a Q&A?
Yeah, there's a lot more slides.
Oh, we only have about
but
5 minutes
we
more
can
presentation time.
What's my cutoff?
5 minutes and then 5 minutes for Q&A.
Oh, okay. I didn't realize it was gonna be that short. Well, let's just go ahead and skip to the next slide then. This is just planned treatments. The point of this slide is just that we are taking not only the treatments in the project area into account, but like projects on the border of the treatment, or the project area. So because those obviously will affect outcomes within the project area. So there's a lot. It's complicated, but we are integrating all these, whether they were completed, the time scale in which they were completed, and where they are in their planning stage, if that's where they're at, and we're incorporating that into our planning. Next slide, please. We can skip this. I don't think we have time to go into Planscape given the constraint, but just know that Planscape is something that you'll definitely want to check out. It's free, it's open source, anyone can play with it. It's designed for collaboration and iteration so that you can build on treatments at large scale. So this is just a screenshot of some of the proposed treatment areas within the project area. We can skip that. Let's skip that. This is one of the project outreach, or excuse me, community outreach maps that we created. I have a QR code that I encourage you guys to either shoot with your phone real quick or take a screenshot of, but this is where the community can come in and mark their concerns and offer advice or point out things that we've missed. And I just want to emphasize that, you know, as hard as we try with all the tools that we have, you're never going to beat somebody who's been walking their dog or going hunting or recreating or fishing in this area for 20 or 50 years. Like, we want that community level experience and advice integrated into our planning. So everybody, if you want to participate in that, you want to share it. Our deadline for submissions is the 17th of this month. Please participate in this, share it with your friends. And we will incorporate that into our planning. We can skip that. This is just to show you how we do suitability modeling. We take all the layers that we've been discussing and many more, and we stack them, and we can show where there's overlap in the different priorities. One of those would be, you know, the community contributions through that survey that I just shared. But we're able to show where the highest impact areas will be for our treatments based on taking all this information and putting it into this sandwich. Next slide, please. And so finally, the next step is to, you know, to start to structure a treatment analysis. So part of that, and one thing that I haven't had time to present on, is there's lots of research that shows how fire is spread once it enters a community in the WUI. So we have building proximity, building age data that we're incorporating into this. I don't really have time to go into the different building code changes, but that is all incorporated into this so that we can holistically look at a neighborhood or community and target the places where they are most at risk, not just for themselves, but to spread that fire throughout the larger community. So we can get to a sophisticated granular level by using that. And we've had a lot of help from El Dorado County's GIS team in collating that data. And then through our suitability analysis, we can start to look at treatments in these blocks of 1 to 3 years, 3 to 5 years, and 5+ years. And we can run modeling benefits based on those treatment scenarios that go out 5, 10, and 15-year time steps. We can look at greenhouse gas emission reductions, carbon stocks, how our canopy cover looks, the stand density, and the probability of torching, and many other metrics that we can look at the benefits of each individual treatment. And that's where my portion of the presentation concludes. I welcome questions, please.
Mark, do you have anything else to add before we go to 5 minutes for questions?
I really just want to say, you know, the Planscape element, what it showed there, it kind of gives us a general sense of where I think some of our projects might be based on some of the input and some of the metrics that Nick was kind of going over. And, you know, it's going to be really interesting because, as you saw, we jumped over a screen that showed where the structures and impervious surfaces are. These projects are going to be designed to be right in the community. So working with OWAPR and others on the home hardening and defensible space is going to be really key. But it is complicated project design, and it's not like you have a wide open forest where you can just put the polygons on ridge tops and so forth. This is working right around the communities in steep, right adjacent to steep canyons. And so I just appreciate Nick putting this framework together so we can come up with a good outcome of project design. So Craig.
Thanks, Mark. I see Craig has his hand up. And then Nick, if you don't mind putting your email in the chat so that folks can get in touch with you and have opportunities to get the information that we weren't able to cover today.
Yeah, no problem.
Cool. Go ahead, Craig.
Mark, I was thinking if we haven't done it already, that we ought to bring Nick over to my side of the river. And about halfway up the Chili Bar grade, there's that big long stretch of turnout, and we can all park there and then get our field glasses out and see who can count the first 1,000 dead Douglas fir trees. and it's terrifying. And I know it's steep ground, but you know, I'm familiar with risk and hazard assessments. We have one of the windiest roads in North America. We have a significant amount of traffic. I would say not everybody on that road is sober, particularly on Friday, Saturday, or Sunday. It's a very high risk landscape, very steep. I don't know, Mark, if you remember the name of the fire, but around 2010, there was somebody camped out down by the power plant and started a fire, and it got up into the edge of Placerville in like 10 minutes. And
Yeah.
now we have all that mortality from fur engraver that wasn't there 10 years ago. So I'm hoping, you know, I'm hoping that we figure out to get enough treatment on that south side of the river. If we can't do anything else, at least up near the edge of that ridge to make a significant difference, because it's only a matter of time. The dead trees, and it's so steep you could hardly walk on that slope, let alone use a machine. But if you're looking for risk is the travel time, the steepness, the curves, the blah, blah, blah. But the hazard is 1 bazillion dead Douglas fir trees standing there on the north-facing slope, and they got nailed in the drought. You know, they just couldn't handle it. And they were beautiful, and they were all healthy, and they were way over dense. And now the majority of them are dead. So if I was, every time I drive that road, I get the tremors just thinking about what would happen if somebody goes off there and that lights up, because it would get into downtown before we could say howdy doody.
Yes, please. That is just the kind of information that I want to get. If you don't mind taking the time to fill out that survey, you can only put one issue in each survey, but you can fill out the survey as many times as you want. It has a photo in the survey home screen. There's a video where I've walked through all the different ways you can use the survey. You can add photos, you can bring in files to drop in to support what you have to say. Please fill that out, put that information in there. The more detailed, the better. And if we need to drop that QR code to the group here again, I can make that available.
That'd be great. Thanks, Nick. Dave, go ahead. And then we'll need to transition over.
Okay. Mark, I continue to be concerned about rights of entry. And that's the first step before implementation. What kind of timeline are you looking at, and what kind of plans do you have to get those rights of entry? I mean, it looks like we need hundreds or thousands of rights of entry to get anything done.
So, again, I think that right of entries is always something that we're going to have to deal with. We've got probably almost 3,000 right of entry agreements right now, and it takes a while. But this process that we're in right now is getting people to give us their input, because this is their project, not ours. And if we build advocacy and awareness and build a project around their priorities and what they believe is going to be the best for their community, then I think we will have more success in acquiring right of entry agreements. And so that's my best, I think, answer that I can give you right now.
Thanks, Mark. Okay, Mark, Nick, and Juliana, we didn't get to hear from you, but thank you for being here and putting your contact information in the chat. Appreciate all of that. And did you say, what was the date for submissions for the strategy at the QR code?
The 17th.
The 17th. And we can send that out as part of the SOFAR MailChimp mailing list as well. Decca, if you want to capture that as an action item.
Yeah, we could actually put in that flyer, Juliana, in there as well.
I'm just talking here. Can I drop a Word document into the chat, which would include, well, actually, I don't have the final version of that flyer. So Mark, can you have Courtney send that?
Oh, yes, I'll do it.
Because yeah, we just changed the date on the survey yesterday.
All right, wonderful.
Sophie, can you just put this out as an email, all the contact stuff as an email to us? I'm trying to copy and paste. It's not working for me. So
Sure.
I'd appreciate it. Thank you.
Yeah, no problem. Okay, wonderful. Well, thank you so much, RCD team, for all your work that you're doing there. It's exciting to be able to put direct feedback into this big process. Moving on to another major process for wildfire resilience, the Community Wildfire Protection Plan. Like I said in the intro, we had an overview of the Wildfire Protection Plan from Tom in May, or maybe it was June, before we went on our summer hiatus. And now Tom's here to talk about the public engagement piece. So go ahead, Tom. Thanks for being here.
Yeah, no problem. Thank you, Sophie. So just on the public engagement opportunities, we're about 5.5 months into the CWPP update project. And really right now focused on both stakeholder and public engagement, and in the background still working with our project team over at Jensen Hughes to work on a lot of the other core update sections and do a lot of the hazard and risk analysis and mapping. So real quick on the stakeholder outreach, we've solicited input from over 160 different agencies and organizations throughout the West Slope of the county, and have had a pretty good response so far, and hoping to wrap that part up by the end of the month. But our main focus over the last, well, really started at the beginning of September, was the public engagement portion of it. So we started an outreach campaign with messaging on Facebook, through the local newspapers, and also just a ton of flyers. So really promoting both the public survey and the public workshops that we just wrapped up. Really the main focus of that is taking the opportunity to hear from the public and communities across the West Slope, to get an idea of what their local wildfire related concerns are and what they view as the biggest threats in their communities. And that input is really critical for us in order to develop a truly effective, actionable, and community-driven plan. So we just concluded our first round of public workshops on Saturday. We started out last week. We had 5 in total, one out in South County on October 2nd, North County on October 3rd. And it was a busy day for us on Saturday. So we started at 9 a.m. up in Pollock Pines, and then 1 p.m. in Diamond Springs, and then ended down in Cameron Park. So overall, pretty good attendance. I think we were expecting more, but that's all right. We've gotten some good feedback so far. So for those presentations, it was staff from my office, also our Jensen Hughes project team, and then representatives from the steering committee that we have for the CWPP. And that included, really as part of the presentation for identifying and talking about the hazards and risks, representatives from CAL FIRE, County Fire, and then the El Dorado County Fire Safe Council. And had pretty good participation or attendance from the local associate fire safe councils in those areas as well. Real quick is just like an overview of the workshop content. It was explaining what the CWPP development is. So what is a CWPP, the goals and objectives for the final plan, and then the approach, outcomes for developing it, and then the timeline. Then we spent a good portion of it talking about the preliminary hazard and risk assessment. So we early on in the process kind of were tasked with splitting the planning area into delineated planning zones. So we just a couple of weeks ago landed on those. So it splits the West Slope planning area up into 4 subgroups. So kind of explained what that is and what that means for the project. Went through a ton of different maps showing what those hazards and risks are across the West Slope. Touched on climate impacts, kept it pretty brief, and really just emphasized, you know, as years go on, summer, especially fire season, it's getting hotter and longer, so increased fire risk there. And then dove into the parcel and neighborhood level risks, so across the landscape from interface to intermix, and then some of the community level risks and vulnerabilities. And examples that we talked about in each of the workshops include, you know, overall the West Slope and the county as a whole is a really high fire environment, and it's based on things like vegetation, isolated communities. We have so many communities that are one way in, one way out, even if they didn't meet the CAL FIRE subdivision review program criteria. We have 100 of those, and we know there's even more. So that was a big topic of the workshop and the subsequent breakout sessions. Other risks and vulnerabilities included communication challenges, complex multi-jurisdictional responsibilities, topography, unmaintained vacant lots, things like repeat fire history, and then large drainages and open spaces, and very much aligns with Mark's project as well, and across the board with the county. And then utilities and critical infrastructure. So it's about a half-hour or so presentation, and then we reserved some time for a Q&A session, and then had some breakout sessions, and that's where really we spent the bulk of time at these workshops, and got to break out into smaller groups and have some hands-on activities for them. And then the feedback that we received from those will be synthesized by the project team at Jensen Hughes and our steering committee for incorporation into the final CWPP. So in those breakout sessions, we tasked each group with answering 3 main questions, and then ranking those with their top 3 for each, and then reported out on those. So those 3 questions, what are your biggest wildfire-related concerns? What is and isn't working for wildfire prevention, mitigation, response, and recovery in your region or in the county as a whole? And then what recommendations or strategies would you propose to improve individual neighborhood and community wildfire resiliency? So really great feedback from all of those groups. Pages were pretty much filled up. So there was a lot of common themes across those, but looking forward to compiling all that and including it in the plan. In addition to the workshops, our other main outreach strategy has been through a public survey. And that opened up at the beginning of September and is available through the end of October. As of this morning, we have just about 1,100 responses to that, and hoping to get more. We kind of had 2,000 as our target goal for those. So we'll continue putting out social media messages, and probably another flyer and link in the local papers, just making one final push for those. So I can include that link as well in the chat. So if you're able to help get that word out, would greatly appreciate it. And then just real quick, so next steps for the update for the CWPP. Currently reviewing draft chapters and anticipate completion of that in November or December. And then also in November is when we get the first look at the recommended action plan. So we'll be working with the steering committee and some of the larger like land ownership and utility/infrastructure type stakeholders to take a first look at that and see if there's anything we missed and add to that. From there, we anticipate that the draft full version of the CWPP will be completed and released in January, and then start another round of workshops. So looking at kind of middle or end of January, doing a specific workshop for the fire safe councils. And then in March, doing 3 different workshops, 2 virtual and 1 hybrid for that public draft review. And then wrapping everything up and hoping to do the final CWPP presentations in May. I'll also include the link to the project website. We'll be adding the PowerPoint that we had from the CWPP workshops, the public one, to that website. So anybody that is interested can go back and look at that. But it also has the public survey link and also an option to sign up to stay up to date on the project. And then I think that's about it, unless there are questions.
Do we have any questions for Tom? And so Tom, just to be explicit, when is the next opportunity for public input?
So through the public survey, which goes through the end of October. And then once that draft is completed, probably share that beginning of February or so, and then have another opportunity for comments on that. And then really the focus will be in March for those public review, the public draft review workshop. So it's going to be a large document, probably over 400 pages. So want to give people plenty of time to take a look at that. So that's why there's that gap between the release date and those public workshops.
Great, thank you, Tom. Dave, go ahead.
Tom, I can see using the CWPP for Firewise communities for risk assessment and action plan. What other uses are you seeing that we can have for the CWPP?
So the main thing is funding projects that we include in the CWPP and pursuing grant funds. Many of the wildfire mitigation and prevention grants require that projects already be identified in the CWPP. So that's why we're going through this process right now. The last CWPP, or the existing one, was specifically done at the Fire Safe Council level. Obviously, that has grown in the last 4 years. We're up to 32 Fire Safe Councils instead of 24. But really with this one, we wanted to fill in the geographical gaps and have it apply to the entire West Slope. So the hope coming out of this in terms of like fuels reduction projects is that we're not just doing smaller scale projects at individual community levels, but really expanding those and trying to maximize size and efficiency and effectiveness of those. So in most cases, I envision this being like larger projects that impact several different fire safe councils, but all of those fire safe councils working together to submit for those grant applications. It'll also support a lot of additional things like public outreach and education, further supporting the defensible space and home hardening efforts across the county, and then pursuing additional grant funded opportunity or grant funding opportunities for things like infrastructure and asset protection, things like additional water storage for some of those more remote communities, and evacuation planning.
So grant funding leading to implementation.
Yep. Then we hand it off to Mark to do all the right of entries.
Good answer, Tom. I like that one. Oh, Tom, do you have anything to report on the Weber Creek?
So we're separate project, but another large one. We're currently still in the environmental review process for that. We had a meeting last week with Callaway-S and FEMA. We had an opportunity to add a couple of parcels to the project boundary that in reviewing everything seemed like they were kind of they weren't left out, but in looking at the map, it looked like we intentionally left them out. So we were able to expand that a little bit and get up to that 525 number of parcels that the project applies to. Next steps are going to be hiring a consultant to oversee the construction management portion of that, and then developing the defensible space and home hardening assessment program with CAL FIRE. I mentioned earlier that often the case in our county is that they're complex and multi-jurisdictional projects. So for defensible space in particular, our county obviously has the updated defensible space ordinance. The city of Placerville also has their own ordinance, and then CAL FIRE has their own defensible space requirements, and have for this pilot program, not just for our jurisdiction, but the others, a defensible space plus program. So working with them to create the criteria that encompasses the requirements of all our different agencies to be able to go out and do those assessments. And we anticipate being able to do those probably late winter, early spring of 2025. And that's where the exciting work on the ground actually starts for this one.
That's exciting, Tom. Thanks.
Great, thank you, Tom. And yeah, if you want to share the links in the chat, and I believe most people have your contact information, but if you could add that as well, that would be great.
Perfect, I'll do that now.
Yeah, thanks again for being here. Tom joined maybe 6 months ago and started attending SOFAR more regularly, and it's great to have a dedicated person from OWOPR in the room. Thank you. Okay, so I'm going to be talking about SOFAR partner goals and planning alignment progress, and I'm providing this update for Michelle Wolfgang, the partnership coordinator at El Dorado National Forest. She's on a very brief vacation, though many of you might see her tomorrow at the California Wildfire and Forest Resilience Task Force Regional Meeting Resource Fair. So Mark and Tom both referenced coordination of many multi-jurisdictional priorities, and we all know that SOFAR's intent is to be at the center of that, helping to coordinate multi-party collaborative projects and making sure that folks aren't stepping on each other's toes, making sure they aren't being duplicative. And as I believe you also know, every year the SOFAR Collaborative sets annual goals for itself that contribute to the broader cohesive strategy goals of resilient landscapes, fire-adapted communities, and safe and effective wildfire response. And Decca, if you want to share those 2024 goals in the chat, just so people can remember what those look like. So when SOFAR began, and according to my records, CBI at least has been, this is our 49th meeting that we facilitated of the SOFAR Collaborative. So when SOFAR began 50 or more meetings ago, to my understanding, communication and collaboration efforts in the watershed were really struggling. And for many years, SOFAR was one of the main places that helped build the muscle to work together. But now that muscle is pretty strong, and many of your organizational partnerships are pretty buff, pretty robust. You have communication meetings in your own venues, and it's not all centered around the collaborative. They happen on specific projects. And we have heard really clearly that there's still value in the SOFAR Collaborative as existing as a largely informational venue. And also it's such an important gathering of perspectives and interests that Michelle has started to look into perhaps how there could be some ways to use it a little bit more meaningfully. So Michelle has spent time over the summer combing through the plans of 45 different agencies working in the watershed or the region, identifying their goals that might align with our cohesive strategy goals, and incorporating their metrics of success into our annual planning. So she has this all documented, and from there, the intention is to really see how that fits with our annual planning, and then revisit the SOFAR structure and improve its visibility, align the goals and priorities to be expressed by SOFAR as the SOFAR goals and priorities, and then improve funding coordination and measures of success. So Michelle can share more information about that at the Landscape Vision meeting on October 24th. For now, the charter signatories of SOFAR are the decision, not for now, but for now. And then the charter signatories of SOFAR are the decision-making body for the collaborative. So I just wanted to check in and see if there are any concerns about moving forward with that process. The idea is that we would discuss it in the in Landscape Vision, and then it would be part of the planning either in our December meeting or our January meeting. And I did want to turn to you, Mark, because Mark and Michelle have been working closely on this in the context of the RCD's project pipeline work. So Mark, go ahead and speak to the collaborative alignment.
Yeah, it's something we kind of been talking about and sharing resources to see how we can identify who's doing what's the initiative, and what's their intent, what are they doing, where are the gaps, and so forth. So she's been able to do her part with her stakeholders and so forth, because we know every stakeholder is not involved with every collaborative, or there's different stakeholders with different collaboratives. So we're trying to share and partner on this effort. And I think that we're also trying to share how we can support these collaboratives, especially SOFAR, and help refine it and make it sustainable moving forward with a defined purpose. And I think that you did a really good job, Sophie, on summarizing that. So that being said, that yes, I'll provide further explanation on how the RCD's project pipeline is integrating with this. I think a little bit more when Michelle does her presentation.
Great. So yeah, I'd go to the members of the SOFAR collaborative if you want to share any thoughts. Are there any concerns, anything you want to make sure that Michelle is keeping in mind as she goes through this assessment before we bring it to the landscape vision, which is our technical subcommittee on October 24th. And that meeting, by the way, is going to be a hybrid in-person at El Dorado National Forest headquarters and online meeting. Or if anyone has questions as well.
Sophie, okay. The October 24th, we can be in person at the Forest Service. What about the biomass meeting at 11? Is that also in person?
It wasn't intended to be. That is a little bit of a tight turnaround, huh?
It's okay. I mean, I'll do my Zoom, I'll eat lunch, and I'll go over there.
Let me make a note to follow up with the biomass planning meeting, the biomass planning team and Michelle about that.
Okay. And you'll send us a reminder that it's hybrid?
Yeah, of course.
I mean, I like going in person if I can.
Yeah, it's nice to be in person.
Oh, and at the Forest Service, right?
On Forney Road. Mhm.
Yeah, okay.
And Dave, does that, since I have you talking, does that sort of alignment of different partner priorities informing the SOFAR priorities for the following year sound like a good process, a good path?
Talking about, yes, I don't think I've seen Michelle's document,
Mm-mm.
so I don't know what's in it, but sure, chatting about it.
Yeah, at this point, it's really just a synthesis of all of the goals and the mission statements of the different entities working in the region.
Okay, we'll have a document to look at on the 24th?
I
Or by
believe
the
so,
t-
yeah. Yeah,
Okay,
we should. Anyone else? Any thoughts, any curiosities? All right. Okay, wonderful. So we're at the end of our meeting, but a couple of updates. The last meeting of 2024 was moved from November to December 11th. And you know, historically, we have not provided a calendar invite for the collaborative just because there's so many people who sometimes attend and sometimes do not. So we're now providing an opt-in option to be included and for you all to be included in a calendar item for the collaborative meetings if you would like to. Decca, could you share that link? So if you would like for us to automatically include you in the calendar item, just go to this quick Google form and fill in your information. We are doing this at the request of a few different members, and we found that calendar communications between iCal and Outlook and Google Calendar can get a little bit funky, and sometimes people get multiple updates and it can be kind of annoying. So I just wanted to make sure that we're not, you know, signing people up without asking their permission for something that is gonna fill up their inbox. We'll still post and send out meeting changes and cancellations if you want to continue to maintain your own calendar item. And Decca, just so people have it, will you share the meetings page for this collaborative? Yeah. The other update, like I said, the October 24th Landscape Vision meeting will be hybrid. We'll send out more information about that ahead of time. And we'll be working together on the initial planning alignment work that Michelle has started, which is very closely aligned with the project pipeline work that the RCD is doing, and that a number of folks are working on, right? Like last meeting, we heard from El Dorado Water Agency about their programmatic watershed plan that is very multi-jurisdictional. Yeah, and then the only other update that I have is the community development group. That's a group that started from the Caldor tour around this time last year, and it includes TCSI, Sierra Institute, Michelle from El Dorado National Forest, and Norma from the SOFAR Steering Committee. And they've been putting together a concept for a number of interviews about workforce development needs that will help progress the SOFAR cohesive strategy goals. Are there any other updates or announcements from anyone who's here? Or any questions about anything that I've named?
Oh, Sophie, I sent you a link, and it's Amador El Dorado Forest Forum next week, Wednesday at 6. What's it called? Steve, maybe you can help me. The Golden Dragon Restaurant, I think it is, on Broadway. Andrew Mishler is also going to be talking about the Caldor work, similar to what Susan was doing. And Andrew, I think that's his name, Mishler. Anyway, it'll be similar to what Susan presented, but I think it'd be good to have people there.
Thanks, Dave. Yeah, and we'll send that out with the next newsletter as well.
Thank you. Yeah, it's next week, so we don't have a lot of time.
Okay.
In fact, your RSVP is like the 14th. I think that's their deadline.
Oh, okay. Good to know. Any other updates or announcements? I believe, I think it was in maybe the end of September, there was going to be a Sierra Institute presentation on how they have used biomass to help recover from the Dixie Fire. That had to be canceled at the last minute because of illness, but they are working on rescheduling. Greg, go ahead.
Hey, good afternoon. Thank you, Sophie. I just wanted to let everyone know that on September 10th, the Board of Supervisors did approve the acceptance of USDA Rural Business Development Grant funding to fund a contract with EcoStrat to perform a bioeconomy development opportunity zone analysis of El Dorado County and to issue a rating for the county. And there was a presentation that was enthusiastically received by the Board of Supervisors. We are moving forward with the contract. It's interesting to note that both Placer County and Nevada County are also in this process. So the whole TCI region will have zone ratings at some point in the next 6 to 12 months.
Very
And the
cool.
intent, by the way, not to leave that hanging, is as it is implied, the intent is to demonstrate to developers and capital investors that El Dorado County is positioned very well for the developing economy related to biomass utilization. And so we're hoping this is really going to be an economic driver for us to garner interest from the development and capital investment community. And that's correct. I saw Elisa say Butte County already has it. San Joaquin County has it. And I think hopefully El Dorado County will be the third, but I think Placer and Nevada might be a little bit ahead of us in the process.
Thanks, Greg. Any questions for Greg? All right, and as David mentioned, the biomass working group is meeting at 11 on October 24th. That meeting at this point is still just online on Zoom. All right, any other announcements? Okay, everyone, thanks for being here. We'll see everyone in the collaborative meeting on December 11th. That's our next collaborative meeting. And then again, the working group and landscape vision meetings are on October 24th. Have a great day, everyone.
Thank you.
Thanks, Sophie.